It was just another quiet morning in Ohio. Or at least, that's how it looked from the outside. The sun had barely climbed over the maple trees when I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my old blood sugar monitor. For years, that little screen had been my enemy, flashing numbers that reminded me of how far I'd fallen. But that morning, it showed something different. A number so normal, so steady, I thought the thing had finally broken. I blinked twice, cleaned my finger, tested again. Same result. Normal. For a minute, I just sat there, motionless, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the slow tick of the wall clock. My black coffee sat untouched beside me. No sugar, no cream. Just the way I'd learned to drink it since everything changed. But this time, I didn't taste bitterness. I tasted victory. I ran my hand over the table's worn edges. The same table where I'd once cried over a reading of 300, where I'd sworn I'd never eat birthday cake again, where I'd hidden my fear from my kids. Now I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. I looked out the window at the small yard where my grandson's toy truck still lay half-buried in the grass. For the first time, I felt a strange pull. Not of exhaustion, but of energy. My legs wanted to move. My heart wanted to move. You know, for years, I thought diabetes had written the final chapter of my life. But I was wrong. It wasn't a miracle pill or some fancy treatment that saved me. It was one small change. Something so simple most people would laugh if I told them. And maybe that's why it worked. Because sometimes, the smallest shift can rewrite the biggest story of your life. If I'm being honest, my story with sugar started long before any doctor mentioned the word diabetes. I grew up in a small Ohio town during the 1960s, back when nobody thought twice about a glass bottle of Coke or a slice of warm apple pie. My mother, bless her heart, believed sugar was love. Every Sunday, she'd bake pies that filled the whole house with that sweet, buttery smell. And when she'd hand me a slice, smiling with flour still on her cheek, it felt like happiness itself. Dad worked long shifts at the steel mill. He wasn't much for words, but when he brought home a pack of donuts on payday, that was his way of saying, "We're okay, kid." Food was our comfort, our celebration, our way of feeling rich when we didn't have much. I remember summer fairs where I'd run wild with cotton candy stuck to my fingers, or sitting on the porch with a cold root beer after mowing lawns for 50 cents. Back then, nobody warned us about sugar. It was in everything, and it made life taste good. But there were signs I ignored, even as a kid. My Uncle Joe used to sit quietly at family dinners, sipping water while the rest of us dug into pie. Mom would whisper, "He's got the sugar," like it was some kind of secret curse. I'd look at him, tired eyes, trembling hands, and think, that'll never be me. Funny how life comes full circle. Back then, I believed the American dream was a full plate and a sweet ending. I didn't know that those small indulgences, those tiny spoons of comfort, were quietly building a storm inside me. I didn't know that one day, the very thing that made my childhood so sweet would turn into the battle of my life. Life moved fast once I hit my 40s. I had a wife, 2 kids, and a mortgage that felt bigger than the sky. I was working long shifts at an auto parts warehouse on the edge of town. 12 hours of lifting, sweating, and living off vending machine coffee. Most mornings, breakfast was a couple of glazed donuts and a cup of sugar-loaded caffeine to keep my eyes open. I told myself I was too busy to eat right, too tired to care. That's how it starts. One excuse at a time. By lunchtime, I'd grab a burger and fries, scarf it down in my truck while checking bills. By evening, I'd stumble home, half dead, and my wife, Linda, would have dinner waiting. Mashed potatoes, fried chicken, maybe a slice of pie. She meant well. So did I. But our lives revolved around comfort food and quick fixes. I didn't notice the small changes at first. The constant thirst, the midday fatigue, the mood swings. I thought it was just age, or stress, or the night shifts catching up. I'd pour another cup of coffee and push through. But inside, my body was waving red flags I refused to see. I remember one night at my daughter's recital. She was singing, "You Are My Sunshine," and halfway through I felt dizzy. My hands trembled. My shirt clung with sweat, and all I could think was, "Don't faint here, not in front of her." I smiled, clapped, pretended I was fine, but deep down, I knew something was breaking. The doctor called it pre-diabetes. He said it like it was no big deal. Just watch your diet, maybe lose a little weight. I nodded, promised to be careful, and stopped at a drive-thru on my way home. Back then, I thought I could outwork anything. I thought strength meant pushing through the pain. But the truth is, I was slowly digging my own grave, one sweet bite at a time. I was 60 when my body finally had enough. It started with a strange tingling in my feet, like pins under the skin. Then came the constant fatigue, the blurred vision, and the bathroom trips every night. I told myself it was just part of getting older. But one morning, while trying to lace up my shoes for work, I realized I couldn't feel my toes. That's when Linda insisted I see the doctor. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and fear. I remember sitting on that crinkly paper, pretending to read a magazine while the nurse pricked my finger. The doctor came in a few minutes later with a printout and a look that said it all. "Richard," he sighed, "your A1C is off the charts. This isn't pre-diabetes anymore. You've got type 2. Type 2. Two words that landed like a hammer. He kept talking about diet, exercise, medication, but all I could hear was the word disease. My father never had it. My brothers didn't. Why me? When he said, "If you don't change now, you could lose more than your legs." My heart sank. He didn't mean it as a threat. He meant it as truth. But I felt angry, embarrassed, and betrayed by my own body. At home, I tried to act normal. Linda cooked dinner like always, but I just pushed food around my plate. She asked what the doctor said, and I lied. "Just need to cut back a little," I told her, forcing a smile. I didn't want her to see the fear behind my words. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the small bottle of pills on the counter. My hands were shaking. I thought about Uncle Joe, how he lost his sight, how he died too young. I remember whispering to myself, "This can't be how my story ends." But deep down, I already knew something had to change. The months after my diagnosis were the hardest of my life. Everything started to revolve around numbers. Blood sugar readings, carb counts, insulin doses. Every beep from my glucose monitor felt like a verdict. Every meal a test I was destined to fail. My mornings began with a finger prick, a sting of guilt, and a sigh. I'd record the number, swallow a handful of pills, and stare at the same reflection that looked older and weaker each day. I tried to follow the diet plans, the schedules, the advice that poured from every corner of the internet. Eat this, not that. Walk 30 minutes a day. Avoid stress. Easy words. But living them was like trying to walk on glass. The more I tried, the more trapped I felt. Linda did her best to help. She swapped white bread for wheat, baked instead of fried, and joined me in skipping dessert. But even with her support, I could see the sadness in her eyes. I'd turned into a man who measured life in teaspoons and numbers, not in laughter or love. I began turning down dinner invitations. I stopped walking to the park. I told my grandson maybe next time when he asked to toss a baseball in the yard. The truth was, I was ashamed. Ashamed of my weakness. Ashamed of the body that no longer obeyed me. One night, around 2 a.m., I found myself sitting in the kitchen again. The only sound was the ticking clock and the faint hum of the fridge. I'd just checked my blood sugar. The number glowed bright red, higher than ever. I felt something break inside me. My hands trembled as I whispered to myself, Is this my life now? That question hung in the air, heavier than any diagnosis. And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. It happened on one of those dull, gray afternoons that seemed to stretch forever. I'd gone to the pharmacy to refill my prescriptions. Another month. Another reminder that my body was no longer my own. My legs ached. My eyes burned. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is all that's left. As I waited in line, an older man stood beside me. He was maybe 10 years my senior, with a sturdy posture and a calm smile. He glanced at the bottles in my hand and said quietly, "I used to take those too." I looked at him, half smiling, half annoyed. He didn't look sick. In fact, he looked healthier than I'd ever been. "What did you do?" I asked, expecting him to say something about expensive treatments or surgery. But instead, he shrugged and said, "I started walking after dinner. Every single night. Rain or shine. 15 minutes. No excuses." I almost laughed. "Walking? That's it?" After years of specialists, diets, and pills, he was telling me to just walk? I nodded politely, thinking he was one of those optimistic types who think everything can be fixed with willpower. But later that night, as I sat in the dark with my meter flashing another high number, his words echoed in my head. Every single night. No excuses. I stared at my shoes for a long time. Then, almost out of frustration, I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside. The air was cold and the street was quiet. My first few steps felt awkward, almost painful. My knees popped, my breath came shallow, but something inside me pushed forward. I didn't go far, just to the end of the block and back. It probably took 10 minutes, but when I came home, I felt something strange. Not victory, but relief. For the first time in years, I'd done something for myself. Not out of fear, but out of hope. That first walk should have been nothing. 10 minutes to the end of the block and back. Hardly a workout. But the next morning, I woke up with something I hadn't felt in years. Energy. My legs still ached, but there was a lightness inside me, like I'd pushed open a door that had been locked too long. So, that night, I did it again. 15 minutes this time. The cold air stung my face, but I noticed things I hadn't seen in years. The porch light flickering on Mrs. Daly's house, the smell of pine from the Lawson yard, the sound of crickets that used to lull me to sleep as a boy. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about numbers. I was just living. Days turned into weeks. I began timing my walks after dinner, just like that stranger said. Some nights, my knees protested. Other nights, it rained so hard I nearly turned back. But then, I'd remember his words. No excuses. So I'd pull on my jacket and keep going. After a month, something miraculous happened. My blood sugar reading started dropping. Slowly, steadily. My doctor was stunned. I remember him flipping through my chart, squinting at the numbers. "Whatever you're doing," he said, "keep doing it." It wasn't just my health that changed. My whole life did. Linda started joining me on the walks. We talked again, really talked, like we hadn't in years. I laughed more. I slept better. Even food started tasting different, cleaner, realer. I began to trust my body again. Not as a machine that failed me, but as something that still wanted to heal. Sure, I stumbled sometimes. I had bad days, sugar spikes, aches, but I never quit, because every night, as I laced up my shoes, I remembered that first step, that tiny act of defiance against the disease that had tried to steal my life. And step by step, I was winning. This morning, I walked farther than I ever planned to, down past the church, across Maple Street, all the way to the old bridge where I used to fish as a kid. The air was cool, the sky just starting to glow with dawn, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a patient. I felt like myself. It's funny. After decades of chasing solutions, doctor visits, and fancy diets, the thing that saved me wasn't complicated at all. It wasn't a new medicine, a secret food, or a miracle cure. It was one small change: walking after dinner. 15 minutes a day. That's it. At 65, I never thought I'd get my health back. My doctor once told me I'd be on medication for life, but the more I walked, the more my numbers improved. Month by month, the pills got smaller, the doses fewer, until one day, he looked at my chart and smiled. "Richard," he said, "you're officially diabetes-free." I couldn't believe it. I'd spent years letting diabetes define me, until I realized I could define myself instead. Now, every evening, I still take that walk. Not because I have to, but because I want to. It's my time to think, to breathe, to remember what it means to be alive. Sometimes my grandson joins me racing ahead, his laughter echoing down the street, and every time I watch him run, I silently thank that stranger from the pharmacy, the one who shared a truth so simple it sounded impossible. I used to believe change had to be big, hard, or painful. But the truth is, it starts small. A single step, taken with faith, can rewrite an entire life. If a stubborn old man like me can do it, maybe you can too. So, tonight, after dinner, take a walk. You never know what 15 minutes might change.